Hello everybody, how's it going? It's Ben. Welcome to the Bonny Rackham, and we're on to Season 4, Episode 4 now. Oh yeah, we've got a good one coming up, so without further ado, let's just get straight into this one.
Get us underway.
Okay, so for a title, I've decided to call this one Trust Me. Yeah, so I called this one Trust Me. Two big double acts really tested this episode. Anne says it to Jack and Flint to Silver at the episode's end. And while Jack and Anne are really solid in their trust of each other in this big moment, Flint and Silver's relationship begins to be tested this episode, from Silver's perspective especially. So yeah, that Trust Me doesn't feel quite as solid. And I feel Eleanor also gains a bit of trust here as well, with Max, with Flint, perhaps with some viewers. But yeah, let's get into a brief summary and a rating.
First item.
Unbelievably, we have all new names today. This is written by Peter Ocko and Michael Russell Gunn. Yeah, back-to-back new directors. This one is Mark Jobs. But yeah, wasn't expecting such a change up at this late stage. So that's really interesting. So 4 episodes into the final season now, and shock horror to absolutely no one if you spent 5 minutes watching me, one of these. I do have quite the attachment to this episode, or at least a big portion of it. Things begin in Nassau as they left off, in chaos. Eleanor makes a panic retreat to the fort, and after emotional discussions with both Mrs. Hudson and Max, is filled with a lot of hindsight and regret, and she has a lot to ponder this episode. As does Silver, who after one-on-ones with both Billy and Max, has the stirrings of discontent over the dangers of Madi's passion for Flint's vision. But there could be a solution. Eleanor makes a proposition that leaves Silver and Flint at a crossroads. It looks like it could be game over for my Bonny Rackham duo, but of course, Anne comes in clutch and pulls an absolute madness. Rating wise, this is a really odd one, because without the Anne hype, this is a pretty transitional, plot focused kind of episode. Most of it's great, some of it's a bit so-so. It would still be very high 8s, low 9s. But yeah, that Anne scene gets it an extra 0.5 at least. I'm going to go with another 9.5. So yeah, strong 9.5s back to back. But yeah, let's get straight into this deep dive.
Next item.
Okay, so yeah, we'll start on Nassau again. As I mentioned, this is quite plot heavy and lots of kind of mingling between characters that you sort of don't often pair together. So I can chat about Madi, Ruth and meet Julius kind of all in one section. But then I think life's just going to be easier if we just do Nassau all in kind of one go, chronologically in this one. And then of course we'll end on Anne and Jack, because of course we will. So yeah, let's begin how the episode does with the slaves on Nassau. Not a pleasant way to start things. And so yeah, because of all the noise our guys made, or Billy made specifically, we are witnessing now just a group of people suffering those awful consequences. Brutal whippings. Yeah, it's really hard to watch. Really tough way to open the episode. And while this is kind of going on, the overseer mentions Underhill and his wife and child were murdered. And yeah, I wasn't sure last episode if Barringer was lying to Max or not. So it seems he wasn't. So yeah, does that mean that Billy killed them? Like, it has to, right? Surely it has to. Flint didn't. That's dark. That's really dark Billy stuff. But as we are going to see, that Billy we knew is pretty much gone, and he is quite dark now, and he's only going to get darker. So maybe, I can believe it, which is kind of sad, and I'm trying not to, but I can believe he did do it. So we focus in on one guy who's giving kind of one to watch out for energy. When the overseers kind of name checks him for eyeballing, something to say, Julius, that it's almost certain that this guy will be someone important. And when a messenger comes to inform this awful slaver guy that Nassau has been overthrown, we see that Julius has overheard this. And so yeah, while a slave uprising is a justice and it should be a big woo, we find out a bit later in the episode through a conversation with Madi, who is now there, and Ruth, it's got a little bit more complicated than that. Madi is sent to try and repair some of the damage done by Billy. Julius and his force have only heard of the events what went down on Underhill's plantation from Billy's actions. Pirates turned their pistol on slaves, so as far as they're concerned, the pirates are just as much the main enemy for turning against them. So yeah, instead of breaking spirits, as Ruth points out, all these brutal beatings did was stir them up. So now our guys have another potential problem, an extra hurdle, possibly having to go against people who they wanted for more reinforcements for their army, more hard work for Madi. But yeah, they don't have faith in their leadership, in their control. Yeah, it's a great quote from Ruth. She says, "You must see now, when you wage war on the world fights back." But yeah, this is all pretty much plot. Nothing more to really delve into with this kind of little sub thing. Conflicting for Madi, I imagine, knowing she may have to take a fight, you know, to people she really doesn't want to. But it is a plot that I think resolves itself sort of pretty soon, at least this kind of tension between our guys and the slaves. So yeah, not much more to go over here. So yeah, we get a big action opener with Eleanor fleeing from the riots with some redcoats. Really tense scenes while she's on the back of a cart. This is a really great little action moment for Eleanor. So yeah, she gets cut by a sword or a dagger or something. Yeah, and she fires a pistol, possibly catches her first body. Yeah, I'm not sure if that guy dies. So yeah, we're seeing a bit more pirate Eleanor again here. But yeah, it's a desperate escape for her life here. So Eleanor does well to get away and help a couple of people out en route. The whole sequence, yeah, is shot really well. And yeah, once safely inside, she speaks to the main guy. I actually quite like him. He seems like a pretty reasonable and actually pretty civil guy, but I've not caught his name. He shall be called Captain Handsome for the time being. So yeah, she asks he goes and fetches Max, and she speaks towards Roger's council, who are planning a counterattack from the fort, and she sort of advises against it. Here she is, you know, the Eleanor I really like. This is a really strong Eleanor episode. They argue with her a bit, and she points out, because she knows, that the pirates, they're prepared for it. It will be, you know, a waste of resources and just shows their enemies that they're panicking. And once the same guy sort of argues it's their duty to do all they can to retake it, she says it's lost. For the moment. She sort of says to try and reassure them, I think, but by this episode's end, we'll see she's ready to cut the cord with Nassau. But yeah, Eleanor, she's playing it really smart tactically this episode, but as we'll go on to see next episode, when she is arguably at her best self, or truest, maybe might be the better word, her husband is unfortunately at this moment at his worst. Anyway, Eleanor is informed that Max isn't there. So yeah, first time we join Coalition Pirate this episode, and we get a quick Dooley point of view of him walking through the carnage and slaughter, and he's a bit out of sorts with it all, you know, it's very violent, lots of things going on. So yeah, Flint is giving out instructions to his new chosen captains in what was previously Woods Rogers HQ building. So yeah, one guy shows a little bit of dissent, and Flint points out they were chosen because they seemed the best option to begin rebuilding Nassau. Do I need to reconsider, he asks. And what does this captain do? He looks to Silver. It's fear of Long John Silver he's more familiar with now in recent times. Those black spots. I hate to say it, but Flint not looking that dominating force right now. Not looking like the man you don't argue with. Not right now. I do think we lose that man for a little bit these first sort of 4 or 5 episodes. It's a more reasonable, perhaps even self-realised Flint in some ways. Maybe even appropriate to call him James McGraw again. But at times when you need or you want to see a bit of snap to him, he's keeping calm and he's sort of stepping back from that a little bit. But it's also needed to show this sort of power shift that seemingly right now, Silver is comfortably top dog. You heard him, is Silver's cold reply that just begs no argument. And yeah, the men, they set to their task. And almost to sort of reassure Flint a bit, Silver says the more they realise there is no daylight between you and I, the more they will accept our shared authority. Yeah, again, I don't know if it's as shared as it once was. And as we're going to see, you know, they're seemingly going to be night and day on a plan option by the end of the episode. Silver quietly admits the captain, though, he might have a point. It's worse out there than he anticipated. But Flint reassures him all life begins in violence and wailing. It will pass. Damn, okay, that is very Flint-like. That is a very Flint statement. I'm not sure on that one. And I don't think Silver completely agrees either. And Dooley informs them that Eleanor, along with a reasonable force, is secure in the fort. And she sent them a note. To which Silver is surprised she's already taken charge. I don't think Flint is, though. I'll get into that all a bit more when their scene comes up. But she's offering an exchange. 20 of their men captured for Max. So everyone is sort of looking for Max right now. And Flint then asks after Billy. And Dooley sort of disregards worrying about Billy right now. But Silver angrily makes it clear that Billy's in his bad books. And Silver says there are 1,000 men out there who have been awaiting my arrival. They are now armed and angry, and I haven't yet said a word to them. And yeah, Flint, he is fascinating to watch here. Again, you know, he's not running the show right now, and I think he's maybe realising it here. Yeah, maybe realising the moment their thoughts don't align, that he could have a problem. Madi possibly sensing that as well, as she watches Silver rage here. And Silver tells Dooley to make it be known if Billy's not here in an hour, he will regret it. This time, as an OG walrus man, Dooley looks to Flint for confirmation, who repeats, "You heard him." So yeah, they're still just about there. They're still one mind right now, or one unit. But you just get the sense that something's not quite right and a power shift is there. So yeah, after Silver's angry Billy outburst, Flint talks to him alone with Madi present. And Flint says, you know, sort of, despite Billy's bullshit, a wise woman recently told me that one should not allow their personal feelings to cloud the reality of the situation. And yeah, so Flint is giving Madi her props, which I think does bother Silver a little bit. You know, maybe it starts to worry him a little bit, having them so united, as we're sort of going to see. The danger it puts her in, of course. Of course, in a moment, Billy is really going to set that niggle right in there. But you can definitely see a Silver twitch almost. We're going to get a Flint twitch in a little bit, but you see a little Silver twitch here. But the point Flint's making is Billy has influence that is best not ignored. Play it wrong with him right now, and, you know, they're going to have it from all sides. So, yeah, he's not wrong. Flint's not wrong here. And Silver says sarcastically, that's good advice. Was it said before or after he tried to kill the two of you? Yeah, such a tough dilemma. And I think Flint's talking the most sense here, but I can understand Silver's reluctance. Enter the man in question himself. It goes deadly silent. You know, Billy says they've had their handful with a transition. And yeah, Flint, he's trying to be civil, trying to keep his cool and practice what he preached, but you can see that he is really struggling. He's not forgiven him by any means himself. This is all just bigger picture for Flint. And yeah, Madi also not in the best of moods with him. You know, she asks about the estate. Did the very thing we feared happen? And yeah, she just gives a very disappointed shake of her head when Billy sort of a bit sheepishly doesn't answer. But like Flint, she is holding her tongue, keeping her cool for the same reason. And yeah, Flint sort of again points out in not so many words, because of your fuck up, it's important that Madi is able to go to the estates and try and repair some damage with the slaves. Can we trust she will be received there safely? And yeah, Billy is just staring those daggers back at Flint, trying to think of an answer when Silver beats him to it, and Silver looking real menacing here. He says, of course, Billy would never violate the trust I put in him as a brother, as a friend. So yeah, he's sort of laying that threat on here, you know, that warning on heavy. Silver says he'd stop at nothing to see the offence repaid against him. I will see to it, Billy says. I should fucking hope so, Silver snaps angrily. Yeah, I don't know if Billy would still be alive myself if Silver had actually been there at the time to witness it, what went down, that betrayal. But yeah, funny line from Billy here though. Is everyone feeling better now? They got that off their chest. Billy, you're not really in the position to be making jokes here, mate. But it breaks the tension for a viewer, at least. And so he brings up Max. He has her. So Billy takes Flint and Silver to Max, who, bless her, is tied up, gagged. She's probably scared stiff at this point. Again, for a second time, you know, she's kidnapped off screen. We don't see it. Of course, it is Max, and she'll regroup as she always does. But last time she was a pirate's prisoner. Poor girl, she didn't have the best time of it at all. Just about escaped from Barringer last episode, only to be facing judgment again this episode, just as she's been fearing. Yeah, she does deserve a bit of a hard time for everything. But right now, though, with no idea what's about to happen, I do feel sorry for her. Yeah, Billy says if they want her, he wants a chat with Silver alone first. So yeah, they have their meeting. And Silver says simply he's walking out with Max. Whatever leverage you think you'd have, I'd reconsider. And Billy just asks for his ear for 5 minutes. Clock's ticking, Silver says simply. I don't think we've had a clock reference for a while, but of course, an important piece of Black Sail's history. And yeah, Billy points out that it's Max that has been screwing them. Yeah, this is a little bit desperate from him, and pretty obviously so. Sure, Max has played both sides, but I don't think it's ever been this big secret, sort of shock revelation he's kind of making it out to be here. I thought that likely would have come out the mouths of Jack and Anne, probably during, their fallout with her early last season. Flint and Silver, they would have heard about it then. But yeah, Billy's talking here like it's this whole new sort of revelation. But yeah, I don't think it is. But the thing he has got right is her value to Eleanor, or them, when it comes to gaining control of Nassau. He's sort of saying he can sell to the streets that she was behind all of it, i.e. get himself off the hook a little bit, and he wants to trade her for 20 men, he sort of explains, meaning Flint. And Silver points out those men are his brothers. He says those men mean as much to me as they do to you, and I can assure you they mean a hell of a lot more to me than they do Flint. I think they did once for Billy, but I don't know if that's true anymore, Billy. In fact, Billy, he's looking more and more like the man that he despises, as every kind of episode passes this season. At least when Flint was at his most tyrannical, his most unreasonable. While Flint himself, is more in that kind of Flint McGraw kind of middle ground at the moment, which we had in the build-up to Miranda's death until he kind of snapped again. And so, yeah, Billy really starts on his rant. Yeah, he says, Flint's only after the men because he knows he needs a bigger force than his. And knowing Flint, that is possibly a part of his play and what he's doing, but Billy is just letting that emotion, that hatred, getting the reason of, logic here. And yeah, he's getting in his flow a bit, and Silver stops him. He knows this build-up was all to this point, separating the two of them. Billy sort of counters, how long ago was it the two of us agreed he'd be the end of us all? That he'd find ways of driving us over and over into that storm until there was none of us left. And yeah, Billy really getting into it, making some valid points, to be fair, but he's not been around for a while, and yeah, he has missed some things. And yeah, if Billy's so against what Flint's trying to build here, why is he still here? If they all kind of, if they don't defend what they just achieved, it's only a matter of time before their sort of new conquest is challenged. And yeah, Billy is just so, lost in hate. He can't see. He'll lose all he's achieved without Flint and the Maroon Army. And he says, how is this just not the next storm in a very long line of them? And yeah, that's the one that's just kind of zap, puts a little thought, the stirrings of a niggle, put a little niggle just to the front of his mind now, that he just can't seem to get rid of from now on. And Billy sits down at this point and says he told him once, the people closest to Flint are the ones most at risk of being consumed by him. And yeah, Silver not so firm on the defence now, and he says he's going to be fine. But he knows what Billy's getting at here, I think. And yeah, and when Billy says, no, not you, I understand that you've come to care for her. Yeah, and Silver's face, that's just a very don't fuck with me kind of teach face there. He warns Billy very calmly, be very careful. And Billy continues, if anyone is consumed by his need for war, it's her. We can see Billy has hit a nerve. A man whose only weak point used to be himself now has a woman that he very deeply cares about. A woman he knows is deeply entangled in Flint's vision. And with Billy just reminding him, what madness, what storms following Flint can lead to. It's all kind of going round and round in Silver's mind at the moment. While this meeting is going on, we get our first interaction with Hans and Flint. It's very short and sweet, but it's pretty amusing. They're both a little bit awkwardly kind of waiting around for Silver, and it's Hans that initiates the conversation. He says he heard he was a Navy man last time the pirates took control of Nassau. And Hans says it was a good day for him, doing something no one else would or could. Yeah, if I've got that right, killing the wife and child of the governor at the time. Yeah, not something Flint hasn't done. Actually, we've never seen him kill a child before, I don't think, at least not on screen. Point is, Hans is pointed out there's some similarities, and Hans said he thought he'd earned his place by Blackbeard's side for an age, but turns out it wasn't long till Teach figured he could do better. Yeah, Flint wondering sort of what your point is, but like in Silver's previous meeting with Billy, I think Flint sort of knows what he's getting at here. Because it's not just Silver getting stirrings. He's going to start getting little moments of doubt when it comes to Silver's sort of commitment to the cause. And Hans continues, says Flint's counselling Long John Silver to be reasonable, to do what you want him to do instead of what he wants to do. How long do you think he'll suffer it before he decides he can do better than you. And damn, people be trying to break our boys apart right now. It doesn't help when kind of Silver returns from his meeting and Flint asks what happened, and he gives a kind of brief we want, that's all that matters. And yeah, almost like Billy and Hans indirectly are kind of working together here. They're not, but it is like they are. I don't quite know what Hans gains here, and I don't quite know how he's so in with Silver so quickly, or how he's so privy to this Flint and Silver dynamic. Which mostly, from what he's seen so far, it has been Silver leading the show, not Flint. But yeah, this, let's put the worry in that Silver and Flint are going to part ways. The creators are starting. Suffers a little bit for time and rushing here in this scene, I think. I would have liked another Hans and Silver bonding scene at least before this point, to kind of buy this a little bit more, I think. To buy why Hans is so against Flint, going straight in like this. Still a great little scene though, and I love Flint's reaction, to this character. But yeah, anyway, nevertheless, yeah, as said, maybe a smidge of a niggle in Flint's mind now after Hans' warning, and a possibility he might not be so indispensable to Silver as he once thought. Somebody already lurking in the wings, ready to be Silver's yes man, but is able to do those dirty jobs that others won't. Okay, so we are back with Eleanor. She is safe in the fort now, and she is joined by Mrs. Hudson, who's obviously very upset. As Eleanor points out, they're clearly not going to Philadelphia right now. And yeah, Eleanor admits it was always a long shot anyway. Eleanor, why do I have you back in my good books again? Only to know our time is just so limited now. So she sort of wearily sits and says she's right back to where she started. Every fight I have ever won, every death I have ever escaped, every sacrifice I have had bled out of me, it will all have to be repeated, just to get herself back where she was this morning. And yeah, Mrs. Hudson, she's keeping very quiet. She's not saying anything really during all of this. As she says in a moment, spending all this time with her, Mrs. Hudson has grown attached to her. So she has her concerns for Eleanor's future, especially with this next reveal. So yeah, when Eleanor sort of finishes assuring her, Mrs. Hudson asks if she considered joining her to London. And Eleanor says with the debt that her husband owes, he's going to be fighting this debt for the rest of his life. And as long as he is chained to this place, I am as well. Eleanor, you don't have to be. You don't have to be. You could have got away from this, when the stakes were much lower, as we're sort of going to discuss in a minute with Max. And Mrs. Hudson says he might want you to leave, especially when he works out your current state of being. Yeah, and I guess sort of being her maid, she worked out she's pregnant, I don't know, through like undergarments, sheets, and things like that, I'm going to guess. I wasn't sure on first watch if Eleanor knew herself at this point, but I think like she often does, she's pushed it down. She's pushed the reality down, and she's just not faced up, she's not faced up to the reality of it until Mrs. Hudson brings it up here, until she says the words aloud sort of for the first time. Well, she doesn't really say you're pregnant, but, we know what it is. And Mrs. Hudson says, I have grown quite fond of you, ma'am. You are someone determined to be better today than you were yesterday, and in this world, that is in short supply. And yeah, people do be giving her advice in those yesterdays though. Mrs. Hudson, she doesn't always take it, we know that. But overall, I do agree with that statement. So yeah, this moment is quite touching. Mrs. Hudson says she finds herself feeling protective of her. And yeah, remember Eleanor, she's not known her mother since she was a young child, since her mother died. She's not known her mother's love for so long. I think it's a big part of why she is like she is. And we know her father never offered her, words of love or comfort or anything like that really until the end. And even then, it's made apparent that he was after his own ends anyway. Yeah, she just doesn't hear words of kindness like this often, not with such sincerity. And yeah, when Eleanor sheds a tear, facing up to the reality and knowledge, she doesn't want to raise her child here like she was. Yeah, I do. I really feel for her again. And yeah, Eleanor remembers when they first got here, how her mother and father had an argument, and her mother said this was no place to raise a little girl, that it was cruel. And so Eleanor says her dilemma out loud. If she stays, her child is also raised like she was, amongst all this brutality. But if she goes, her husband is left to face it on his own. And yeah, it's just another case, another damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. And Eleanor says, amazing this place, somehow leaves no option other than to hurt the ones you love. And yeah, really similar, pretty much the same sentiment here as Anne sort of made a couple of episodes ago when she said this fucking island makes you do things you don't want to do. Sentiments that sort of starting to crop up with Silver a little bit now as well. In saying ones you love, you know, I think Eleanor means was Rogers, Max, Scott, maybe Mrs. Hudson herself, perhaps even Vane here. Just so many people, you know, such a lot of history. And yeah, that hindsight is really giving her the bigger picture now. Oh yeah, Eleanor, she's such a tragic character just because of that past, her upbringing, and just her kind of rebelling against it all. And yeah, at this point, Captain Handsome comes in and informs her... Captain Handsome, I will learn his name, and informs her that the exchange has been agreed. And so Silver goes to his second meeting of the episode, Max. And Max, bless her, she is sick of it all. She's ready for a vacation at least. Yeah, it's all played out exactly like she knew it would, exactly like she kept telling people. I don't think she's even particularly scared here anymore, you know, now she's not tied up and all that sort of thing, and she's sort of in Silver's hands. I think she's just completely over all of it in this moment. She says nothing as Silver wearily sits, and Silver airs his concern, you know, if they let her go back to Eleanor, he's confident she will be a problem for him all over again. And perhaps a little sarcastically, Max says, of course not. Why would I do that? Maybe she's being sincere with that statement. As is Max's curse, because of past form, it can be really hard to tell genuine from not so with her. But I lean more towards genuine, I think, with that line. But because of kind of the mood she's in, it's maybe not coming across. And Silver does remark on the good form on her part, though, back at that meeting. Life would have been much easier for her to just kill him, but she didn't, and he asks why. And Max admits, while it would have solved some problems, it would have caused more. She would have had to live with it. And yeah, that's the truth. Max can be ruthless to meet her own, ends in past time. We've seen that. But she's never been a monster. She doesn't like the violence and death. She will always try and find the peaceful solution first. Silver ponders the mystery that is Max a moment and asks where would she have sent him. He sort of says it would have had to have been somewhere he couldn't return. And so comes, I imagine, Silver didn't kill him team's best argument for their case. Because this whole setup is quite a lot, you know, which is why I team he killed him. I think this is a little bit of a time waster. It's an interesting enough idea that there's a place, a working camp, where convicts from England are sort of bought, often used by wealthy families to make troublesome members disappear. And if true, you know, yeah, I hope Thomas was given a bit of a better life there. If he did make it, I'm doubtful though. What would it be now? 12-ish years on? He might not even still be alive. But anyway, I won't go into all that now. That's a episode 10 discussion really. But either way, it's bringing more conflict into Silver's mind, you know, into his thinking here. Thinking maybe, you know, I could nip this in the bud then, stop this war. It's certainly a, oh my god, you know, kind of moment on first watch when we, the audience, twig about the same time as Silver does what this could mean in terms of Thomas. Well, most of us twigged. I was still trying to catch my breath and composure after the Anne scene that this scene directly follows. So yeah, obviously the exchange is done, the exchange is made, and De Groot is one of the men that's exchanged, so yeah, you know, he's alive and returned, and Max is brought into the fort. And while Flint and Silver look on, a really interesting look between Flint and Eleanor. I love we're going to see them rebond a bit these next couple of episodes. And so once away from the fort, Silver speaks up a bit about Billy warning him. And Flint points out that, yeah, that's smart of Billy if his intent is to split them, which, of course, we know it is. Yeah, let's not pretend that Billy gives a shit at all about Madi, because he doesn't. You know, this is a vendetta against Flint. But in knowing both Flint and Silver so well, he can use her to get in the middle. And Flint asks Silver, does he need to be concerned it took him this long to bring it up? And Silver says, we are at our least rational when we are at our most vulnerable. He continues, it's a good reminder that without a doubt, she is the point now at which he is the most vulnerable. And yeah, and it's a great little look from Flint here. A very worrying kind of, oh shit. You know, a little chink in the armour. And Silver says, assume we are on the verge of some impossible victory here. Would you trade it all to have Thomas Hamilton back again? And my issue with this is Silver's vagueness. I know it's good TV and suspense, but just have out with it, man. You know, stop being cryptic. Just say it. Say it all. say, you know, Max just told me something really interesting, You know, make it clear you're not just talking hypothetically here. But yeah, either way though, Flint makes it clear in this moment. He says, I think if he knew how close we were to the victory he gave his life to achieve, he wouldn't want me to. You know, also, I'm not so sure on that statement. I think a lot has gone down between here that Thomas wouldn't approve of. And yeah, Flint's still really keeping firm with that, whether he really still believes it or not, that Thomas is metaphorically his reasoning, excuse for all this. And we get a bit of the old Flint twitch when Silver says, it's not really what I asked, is it? Again, yeah, Silver, he's speaking a little bit cryptically, and he says, assume his father found a way to secret him away from London. He didn't, Flint says firmly, cutting him off. But Silver continues, would you trade this war to make it so? It's some kind of hell to be forced to choose one irreplaceable thing over another. And obviously, yeah, that's echoing Eleanor's dilemma that she spoke about with Mrs. Hudson. And Silver admits he knows Billy's game in trying to cause a rift between them for his own ends, but try as he might to get the conversation out his head, he just can't seem to do it. Closer we get to the end, the more contradictions will accumulate, says Flint. And yeah, maybe that's the writers calling me out here, because yeah, I do have some Silver things to chat in the final scene in terms of contradictions. Yeah, and Flint points out confusing issues we once thought were clear. I suppose the good news is that's how we know we're getting somewhere interesting. So yeah, Flint, he's not wanting to hear any of this what-if talk. But again, Silver is being very vague with it, and he's not just really kind of spitting it out. But anyway, at this point, their men are released from the fort, and Max is traded back. And so now is what for me would be scene of the episode, if not, obviously, for Anne. Yeah, two characters who've just been through so much together as lovers at the beginning, enemies, reluctant and kind of weary friends and business partners. Separate, you know, they have learned so many lessons, mostly the hard way, at their own and at others' expense. And so, yeah, now they're sort of stuck, trapped in a fort, wondering what is next for both of them. And Eleanor, she apologises for what happened today. Weary Max, you know, she gets her, I done be telling you for months now, you are on some bullshit. And she sort of says, what happened today was exactly what I have been warning you about from the moment you both got here. Again and again and again. And yeah, poor Max, she really did try her best with this to make this work. No, of course, we never really wanted her to fully succeed because I am ultimately Team Pirate. Though it has got far more complex than that at this point. But if I would have picked anyone to overthrow them, it would be Max. Sure, she'd be sad for it all finally crumbling, but a big part of this, I think, for her is I threw away something really good, betrayed people I really cared for, and for what? Everything I had is gone because of it, she actually says. And yeah, Eleanor knows Max is telling no lies here, knows she's right, because as she said to Mrs. Hudson, she's lost all that she's built too. So yeah, after a bit of silent reflection, Eleanor asks Max where would they have gone, which I think confuses Max a moment, and we go all the way back to possibly Eleanor's first slip in the road, though I still stand by that Max was asking a hell of a lot of her to drop everything, like that, her home, Nassau, in that really early episode 2 I think. And yeah, when Max sort of realises what Eleanor's on about, she's not really here for this conversation right now. This walk down memory lane, turning left into hypothetical alley, yeah, she's not here for it. But she lets Eleanor speak, and she does listen. And Eleanor looks at her and says she was so close to saying yes. In some ways, she really wishes she had. And yeah, while I do wish they had both got away in that second episode and just gone to live a life, but of course, they're only such great, complex characters because all we've been through with them both since. The good, the bad, and the ugly. I don't want to lose two characters like that in the second episode, but with hindsight of all that's happened, yeah, maybe. But maybe it was never supposed to be for the two of them. I don't know if I completely buy Eleanor was so close to saying yes as she's saying here. Certainly not in a romantic way, me and you sort of way anyway. I get no vibes like that between them anymore. No chemistry between them like that since probably that second episode. Both of them on both sides. There's a friendship there now. Maybe even a mutual respect by this sort of scene's end. But yeah, I'm not sure if this is Eleanor trying to convince herself again on something. Perhaps it's with the thought on giving Max a proper apology and decent bit of closure for her, maybe more than anything. So maybe that's why it doesn't come across as quite so true. Maybe it's not. But yeah, she does make a great point. You know, she puts so much into this place. She doesn't know where it ends and she begins. And yeah, that softens Max's reactions a bit. That's a statement that she can relate to. There's similarities in their paths when it comes to Nassau. And yeah, Eleanor continues, in that moment, I couldn't find something sharp enough to make the cut. Oh, that's ironic, isn't it? Anne might be able to help you out with that one. Yeah, because it's the same episode, that statement always makes me think of Anne grabbing that glass. And possibly the point, as it's already happened by this point. Add the fact she's pregnant as well, and sort of saying, I couldn't cut the cord with Nassau. You know, yeah, a lot of symbolism there. Yeah, very poignant and sad speech. And yeah, it's a great monologue by Hannah New. She is such an underrated actor on this show, I think. And yeah, despite it all, I've somehow find myself back flying the flag for Eleanor. Not many do, I don't think, at this point by now. And I get it. But yeah, it's all about to go so wrong. But yeah, she really does sincerely apologise to Max for all of it. She says if she could fix it all, she would. But asks Max if she's honest with herself, given all she's seen in recent months. Can she say she really believes Nassau will ever be what she wanted it to be? And yeah, same doubts that Silver's having. Flint possibly himself now, maybe. But Max, yeah, she doesn't answer, but her face is answer enough. And Eleanor says, neither can I. And Eleanor finally admits maybe there is a way they can take something from it, if she'll help. Oh, now you want Max's help. Now you want Max's help. No, it was an apology. They can move on. Maybe try and salvage something. At this point, Mrs. Hudson enters to inform Eleanor that sails have been spotted on the horizon. Hub is home. And yeah, it's another worst time in awards. You know, Eleanor's just had this great sort of revelation, this moment of understanding and wanting to do better and really, really meaning it this time. But unknowingly and only through love and wanting a future for her unborn child, she's about to change the course of everything because she has a petulant child monster for a husband who's just not going to understand what she's trying to do. And yeah, a lot of emotion goes through Eleanor's face in this moment, and he spots her at about the same time and instructs to move in close to the fort and prepare to retake Nassau. There's really not much to deepen with Woodes Rogers this episode. There's a little scene with him before we get really into Anne and Jack. But yeah, Max joins Eleanor and she knows something's going down with her. After all they just spoke through, you know, she wants to know, what are you planning now, girl? Just tell me, you know. And Eleanor gives her a look and we're like, oh Lord, Eleanor's about to do a madness. We've only just made friends again. But this time, yeah, as I say, it's frustrating in knowing that it's a really good plan. But again, you've got to communicate this with your husband because you don't know what he just did. He doesn't know your condition, you know, where your head's at and the bargain you're about to make. I suppose we could ask, you know, would it matter if he knew? How would that play out if he was privy to it all? Maybe next episode I'll tackle that hypothetical question. But yeah, just it's not going to happen, is it? So yeah, Billy joins Flint and Silver on the beach and they're discussing tactics. And you can almost believe in this little moment that they're kind of one unit again here. Seemingly no friction on the surface. But yeah, Flint is handed a note while they're talking. And once Billy is distracted, Flint shows Silver the letter. And so we reach our final scene on Nassau. With a gate between them, is that gate? That gate, you know, that Eleanor walked through away from Vane the very last time? If so, yeah, very symbolic. And Eleanor speaks first. Should the fight come to pass, the outcome's not certain. What is that many will die and much will be lost. I think we've seen our fair share of loss and I have had enough of it. So I would like to ensure this fight does not come to pass. And she says she's prepared to surrender the governor's surrounding forces to you. All of it. In exchange for the cash. And yes, Silver pretty much rolls his eyes, laughs the idea off. But Flint is listening. Flint is seeing honesty here, I think, from Eleanor. That bond they had in the first season and parts of the second coming back into play these next couple of episodes. A lot of things have happened. A lot of bad faith. But despite that, I do think Flint has a bit of a soft spot or maybe just a good sense when Eleanor is being real and she's being genuine. It's sort of hard to describe what I'm trying to say. Not a protective big brother relationship. But yeah, I think when Eleanor is at her most sincere, Flint is more patient and kind of willing to listen to her. Like me, I think he understands she became what she became because of her upbringing, and because, and because of that, I think he does give her a bit more patience and understanding than most do. Maybe more than she deserves. And Flint makes a good point. The money isn't theirs to give. They have partners who would almost certainly rather fight this out than lose their treasury. I think Jack and Anne have probably got bigger fish to fry at the moment, but I think he probably means more strongly the Maroons, Madi as well. And Eleanor sort of says, not my problem. There's a reason I'm talking to you and not them. I know you're the man that can sort of sort these problems. Flint is still Eleanor's main guy, who she still sees as top of the food chain. And yeah, she says once Woods Rogers is in range of the beach, the deal is off. She won't undermine his position once the fighting starts. Hold on to that one. Right now, in this moment, what do you want to do, she asks. And after a pause, Flint asks how. And Silver... Now, I get Silver's reaction here, I get it. As just explained, the cash is a big deal, and it would be a hassle for them to kind of smooth out. But with the Billy and Max scenes this episode, setting up he might not be quite so ready for this civil war, not the passions for it he once had, worried what that means for Madi, Does his reaction here not contradict that a little bit? I don't know. They want Nassau, want to start a new govern kind of utopia on Nassau, and Eleanor's sort of offering that here. No fighting, no more death. I appreciate that Silver probably wants a bit more conversation about it first in private, rather than Flint just going, yeah, sure, straight into it. But I don't know, the fact it's such a no, kind of fuck no, it just confuses me a little bit. Perhaps handing over the cash would end up, maybe causing them more hassle than if they carry on as they are. While this is a very Silver response, it just doesn't seem to correlate to those earlier niggles he had for me. But I think I've maybe misunderstood something of why, he sort of seems to go back on himself a little bit here. But anyway, so Eleanor goes over how it would work. And Silver again says no, and says to Flint, if she thought she could win this fight, why would she be willing to sell the victory to us? And that's a good point as well, to be fair. Maybe it's not worth this extra what if hurdle. And Flint listening to Silver, because it's a very strong point, and he sort of looks to Eleanor without asking, what he just said. And Eleanor just says simply, I have had enough of this, and I am ready for it to end. And Flint looks into her eyes, and he sees nothing but honesty there. Amazing acting by Toby Stephens here. He's been a little bit underused for me, these first 4 episodes, for my liking. I understand there's a lot going on, with so little time left. But even when he's not got so much dialogue, he still steals most scenes with just a look. But Silver, recognising that look in him, says no. And Flint just says, trust me. Calling back to that title. And of course, we have already heard that at this point in the episode, which we'll talk about in a minute. So Flint enters through the gates with Eleanor, staying behind as a sign of good faith. They sort of discussed that in the deal. So Flint obviously putting a lot of faith in Silver here as well, because now Silver's got to go off and be the man that kind of delivers it, despite Flint knowing he's not keen and knowing these little niggles he's had, and his conversation with Billy. But we can continue this dynamic next episode, I think. This episode is just going to be long. It's interesting. That's probably Nassau now for this episode, I think. We're going to get on to Anne and Jack, but a really quick Woods Rogers scene to kind of set the scenario up. With Woods Rogers now, and a small kind of boat is spotted, and they work out quickly it's a friendly, and the man is brought on board. And he informs him of the goings on, and at this point he only knows the basics. He learns that Eleanor never left for Philadelphia, and that the pirates have taken over. And obviously Woods Rogers, he's concerned for Eleanor here. I'm going to give him that. He got the brunt of my fury last episode. It's a nice bit of concern, humanity shown here for the wife, who he does love. He just doesn't know her very well. He doesn't know how being away from him for just a while has brought so much of her old self out, her realist self back. And he instructs the lieutenant, the next in charge, his change of plans. He's to return to Nassau on the Revenge, and they're to take the sloop, and the prisoners to Port Royal. This guy kind of argues, and Woodes Rogers firmly says no. He understands he wants to be a part of the fight and wants justice for Barringer and all that, but this is what he's asking of him. So yeah, this is all just to set up the danger for Jack and Anne and the rest of the Revenge crew in leaving them in the hands of a now very angry lieutenant captain, who we know is part of a crew of real rotten apples. Alright, let's just get into it. Let's get into it. And so we get into the section that I was out of control. I was out of control in my reaction to this episode for these scenes. Just absolutely, just the ups and downs I went through, the foul, stressed language that came out my mouth. So Jack, Anne and the rest of the Revenge crew are sort of chained and placed in the hold. And Woodes Rogers' instruction is there to be taken to England to hung. And as discussed, he just leaves them in the watch of a few Reds. But of course, as discussed last episodes, these are dark men, and yeah, they are pissed how everything has unfolded. Woodes Rogers was planning on putting all the Revenge crew to death one way or the other, and I imagine that these men would have been allowed, maybe even promised their bit of fun at some point. Perhaps after the first 2 or 3 kill hauls got a bit stale for Woodes Rogers, who knows. But because Teach died a badass, because what's gone down on Nassau, they have been diverted, and yeah, they are not best pleased. So yeah, we join our guys below deck, and yeah, we get a great shot, sort of them looking up, now seeing this captain walk on deck. And yeah, he puts it to Jack, we came for a fight, and we're going to get one. Sure, some of you will be expected to be handovers for appearance's sake, but we're going to have our fun, get some payback before we get there, basically. And yeah, cue the introduction of a big son of a bitch called Mr. Milton. Choose, he says to Jack, who I think is still really in some shock about Teach, just the horrors of Woodes Rogers, the sequence of events that's gone down. He knows what's going down here, but it's like his mind hasn't really allowed him to process it at this point. But he gives a defiant fuck you, when he sort of works out what his choice entails. And yeah, this guy, he just smacks him round the face just so damn hard, like so damn hard. And yeah, Anne's face, she's pulled some great if looks could kill faces throughout this show. Season 2 episode 5 is an absolute classic, but this one, my god, she wants to rip his head off there and then. It's made clear these guys want to fight, and as captain now, Jack has to choose their fighter, or they're going to pick Anne, who he refers to as your partner. So yeah, once again, they're being used against each other because people just know their names as one. Threaten one, you can get what you need from the other, basically. And bless her, she's sort of sat cross-legged. She looks so bloody vulnerable right now, and I hate it. I hate it so much. Every watch, even though I know she's going to be okay, she's going to be a badass, I hate it. I can't. The emotions, it's too much. So yeah, poor Jack, coming to in the present a bit and realising what's going on here. Naturally, he picks his biggest, buffest guy, Mr. Carter, I think he might be called, to fight this Milton. Had this been a fair fight, it's pretty even odds. But of course, it's not a fair fight. I don't know if Jack's still quite understanding that, I don't think, or at least not fully coming to terms with it yet. Again, I think this all comes back to that scene with him and Woodes Rogers in the carriage back last season. How Jack sort of rolled his eyes a little bit when Woodes Rogers spoke about, things that he left out his book. I personally think for Jack, this behaviour from the man and the red coats running Nassau is as worse as any pirate's, worst deeds he's ever come across, I think, and maybe that's what's taken him back a bit. So yeah, right now he's not quite in the headspace of thinking solutions and is disassociating a bit, really kind of lost in the trauma of it all, giving up a little bit maybe. It starts off even-ish, but not long into it, Milton is handed a sledgehammer, and we realise Jack is going to be forced to pick members of the crew to face a brutal death, one by one, until these guys just get tired of it. But someone who isn't disassociating and whose eyes are kind of scanning the area, taking everything in, thinking is Anne. And yeah, as Carver is sent crashing into some jars, lanterns, something like that, the camera focuses in on the smashed glass. And yeah, not much to really say about the fight here. It's not fair, is it? We know these guys aren't fair. They're not good people. So it's another really uncomfortable watch as Milton, just beats this guy over and over with a sledgehammer. and then barely missing a beat once this poor fellow breathes his last, the lieutenant turns to Jack and just says, next. So yeah, next time we cut back to them, they're about 3 or 5 men down at this point. You know, some poor guy's in the middle of a beating. So Anne takes this opportunity to quietly speak to Jack. She points out that any man that stood a chance against them is now dead. We have to do something they're not expecting or we're all dead, she's sort of saying. And Jack sort of asks hopelessly, what are you suggesting? And Anne takes a beat and says, any man. And by the way, yeah, that is just a badass, just little quote, any man. You just like when she says that, you're like, oh my God. You know what's coming. Yeah, but I think Jack, he knows before she clarifies that's what she meant. But he just doesn't want to think it. He's already lost so much in Vane and Teach. He can't even contemplate watching his partner, his soulmate, possibly get beaten to death in front of him. You know, he's rejected the idea before she even says it and before she speaks the words. No, absolutely not, he sort of says. And Anne has to be the one to take command here in this moment. This isn't street smarts, verbal wit that's getting them out of this one. You know, no wheelings or dealings, stealth or the waiting game. This is cold brute strength, those killer instincts that Jack just doesn't have that in the locker like she does. And yeah, Anne's the one thinking rationally here, says we're dead, you know, one way or the other. Either they kill us here or we hang, you know, anyway. She says, trust me. They ask for a name, you don't say shit, and you let them take me. Goosebumps. Goosebumps. Yeah, she was comfortably my favourite character by this point from the go. But just the balls, the courage. You know, after watching a handful of just big, beefy guys get absolutely wrecked, you know, she's sort of saying, I volunteer as tribute. I think she knows this is very likely her death, but maybe she can save Jack, because she couldn't sit and watch him be beaten no more than he can her. But out of the two of them, they and we both all know, you know, it's her that stands the better chance, and it's her that they'll underestimate. We know she's such a, you know, in the moment sort of character, unlike Jack, you know, who I think is just kind of scrolling through a Rolodex of it all right now. And so Jack is asked the next name. He looks to Anne and he doesn't say anything. He trusts her as she asked. Trusts something so important to Anne, as he's learned, you know, during our time with them, despite every instinct probably telling him to give another name or not stay silent, maybe even volunteer himself up. He keeps silent. While I ripped on him a little bit last episode for disregarding her a bit in that scene, this episode really reminding us what she does mean to him and how awful this must be for him to be sort of helpless here and have to sit and watch this. And yeah, we know Anne has some scars, like physical scars. So he's seen her injured before, perhaps almost fatally. But yeah, neither of them would have been through anything like this, I imagine. So yeah, Anne is unchained, and yeah, talk about a roller coaster of emotions. My God, as a massive Anne fan, this is obviously both one of the best, most badass scenes to watch, as well as just one of the absolute toughest. But before I go into it, I want to take a quick tangent. I hope it kind of works out. And I kind of want to thank the creators, because there is a real obvious way that this could have gone, an obvious kind of form of humiliation, awfulness, dominance that these dark men could have taken, or sort of tried to anyway, with a woman stepping up, you know, or even before she stepped up, just having a female prisoner. It would be so easy to take it there. Even just a verbal mention of kind of bringing that threat into this scene. And while only kind of 2 episodes later, Eleanor has to really fight for her dignity in that regard. And, you know, that may come up again when we get there. Though in Eleanor's case, it is in a very different circumstances, with kind of that added threat of the horror of, you know, a man in a blood rage of war. But here, in this moment with Anne, it's not necessary. I mean, it's never necessary. You know, it was an unspoken worry kind of in the back of my mind on first watch. As a lot of film and TV writers would and do take it there, you know, if a female protagonist, vulnerable character is kind of facing off with the bad guy, I'd say 7 out of 10 times the threat's at least coming up in, you know, mention. But thankfully, other than a little bit of sarcastic catcalling, there's nothing like that here. Yeah, and I think a lesser show likely brings in that threat here for more drama and for needing a bigger sense of, fuck yeah, and reward when Anne wins the day. But in this case, the show has just done too much character work with her, too much great character work with her. There's been too much great plot surrounding the build-up to this event. You do not need that moment as well to add any more sense of triumph for Anne here. But anyway, that is a tangent. But hopefully, trying to keep the thought brief, you get what I'm trying to say on quite a delicate subject. I hope it's coming across. Just because you've got a woman in a vulnerable position, it's not necessary to kind of take it there all the time. More often than not, the unspoken threats in the air regardless. Considering how bad and kind of blasé that Max stuff was handled back in season 1, I think they learned from that a bit. But anyway, let's get back into the action of it. So and she gives this guy some great evil eyes as he's unchaining her. But pretty immediately, she's kind of thrown into the fight by her hair. And we kind of wince along with Jack. And she sort of ducks and dives a bit. Again, her eyes are just darting all over the place, kind of taking everything in. She's got a plan of action from the go, I think. But knows she's going to have to take a little bit of a beating first. Well, I say a little bit. She's going to have to take a beating first. She can't just go straight for the glass. I get so mad every time that the guy doesn't even put the hammer down for a woman. Like I was expecting any sort of good form, from these guys at this point. And it's tough for us and of course for Jack to watch as she sort of kicked and whacked around the room a bit. And Milton starts to choke her out with the handle of the hammer. And Anne has to think really fast and gives him a good old bite on the hand. And while in pain, conferring with his comrades, Anne starts to crawl towards the area she needs. Blood already streaming down her face after taking a bloody giant sledgehammer to it. And she's taunted and she's kicked about again a couple of times. And it's really, really hard to watch. But she's slowly making her way to the glass. And I think this is where Jack catches on to what she's doing, what her plan is. So he speaks up for the first time. And get up. Jack is back in the room, back in the moment. And the distraction works. Milton's attention is off Anne a moment as he glances to Jack, giving her the opportunity to grab these big shards of glass in each hand. And when I say grab, oh damn, it makes you wince. It makes you wince. It's still shot of the episode for me though, because it's so badass. Again, just that courage and determination from Anne. And in this moment, you just know something epic is about to happen. And the guy drags her back towards him by her foot. And the music beat, it just changes just as Anne plunges the shard into his leg. A crewmate comes to help out. And he gets another one, I think, in his waist. And Anne grabs the keys off his waist and just throws it towards the crew, hoping for the best. And then it's just chaos. The Reds don't know which way to turn. A couple of revenge crew are shot in the panic. But they free themselves and suddenly the tables have turned. And poor Anne, as epic as this is, that wave of, oh my fucking God, immediately is overtaken with, oh my fucking God. When you see how badly she is wounded, how wounded she is, just blood all over her face. Her hands are just, oh God, it's so tough to watch. And I was just a mess in my reaction. And Jack, he takes that hammer and he absolutely wrecks Milton in a flurry of anger. And then he goes to Anne, who is just, bloody and bruised all over, incoherent, on the verge of unconsciousness. And Milton, I think it was Milton, went at her again, sort of during all this chaos, trying to choke her out. And she had to use the glass again, which was still pretty much embedded in her hand. And I was yelling at Jack at this moment, go to Anne, go to Anne. And he cradles her head and just, really emotional stuff. Just, again, unbelievable strength, unbelievable bravery he's just witnessed from his partner. And she is just gasping, clearly in so much pain, seemingly on the cusp of life and death. And the scene just cuts. And we do not go back to them in this episode. Add on the fact that next episode, Anne isn't even mentioned. And first watch, I couldn't even concentrate or give close to a shit what happened in episode 5. My episode 5 reaction is so bad because I just couldn't focus past the point that I hadn't seen Clara Paget's name in the opening credits. And I was really ready to fully rage quit this show if they killed Anne. If they'd done her death like that. But no. Thankfully, she's going to be all right. She's going to need some recovery, but bloody hell. But yeah, really as much more as I could milk this Anne moment even longer. From a character deep dive perspective, you know, not much more to go over really. She knew they were heading down a bad path. She's known for a while, you know, Jack and Teach with this Eleanor and Woods Rogers business. No, she couldn't have predicted how the last day for them would have gone down. But while Jack is struggling to process it all and in a little bit of disbelief, she's the one that takes control of the situation, which in seeing her in peril, snaps Jack out of his kind of mood, you know, snaps Jack out of it. And that unspoken understanding and communication between them helps her overpower the Reds.
Last item.
So yeah, of course, it's an MVP nomination / win for Anne. I've not even given anyone else anything. But yeah, other than that vein, episode 9 and Teach last episode, there's never been a more kind of set in stone, clear win for me. You know, I knew the result of this one before I even started rewatching. Just, yeah, absolutely legendary Black Sails scene. And that takes Anne up to 4 MVP wins. Of course, technically, she could win again, but I'm pretty confident that that will be her cap now. If 4 is her likely cap, I think that's very solid, and I give myself an absolute pat on the back. For keeping really good restraint with that. I think 4 is really good bloody restraint. No 2.6 I didn't give her, no 2.7, 3.3, 3.10. I could have made 3.8 work as well, to be fair. So yeah, you know, well done, Ben. You did well. You did well. You made it a competition. But yeah, I bow. And I bow. We will have more to talk about with Anne. Anyway, is that all my notes? Yeah, that's literally phenomenal episode, but I know I've done a lot of talking with this one. So yeah, I will say farewell until the next time, until episode 5, halfway point. Very close now, very close to the end. But yeah, thank you for watching. Take care, and I'll see you on the flip side. Peace out.